these various areas and share with us their knowledge and experience and expectation of what can be further done in regard to pursuing this objective of peace and security in the world. With those introductory remarks, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers to start the ball rolling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Datuk Santa, the moderator. So, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Mustafa Muhammad, President of Unam, Ms. Karina Al-Khoury, UN Resident Coordinator in Singapore, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Darussalam, and also Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Hamidun Ali, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, members from the Diplomatic Corps, and also officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, Wisma Putra, Yang Berbahagia Colonel Noor Azman bin Yahya, Commander of the Malaysian Peacekeeping Center, and also eminent panelists who are with me, the co-panelists, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. When I was approached by Unam to speak for today's event, I was contemplating what is the topic. Initially, I was thinking about the reforms of the UN, the issues related to reforms of the UN. However, I changed my mind and I thought I will focus on Malaysia's commitment to international peace and security through the United Nations. And I'm glad that I did not touch on the reforms because it will be an anticlimax after listening to Tan Sri Hamidun and also Ms. Karina. Also, they both spoke very eloquently on the issue of the reforms of the UN. However, if there are questions related to that during Q&A, I'll be glad to discuss. So, what I'm going to discuss, or what I intend next. Yeah, next. Yeah. What I'm going to discuss, the aim of my presentation is to highlight Malaysia's commitment or contribution to international peace and security. Malaysia, as we all know, as it was even mentioned by Tan Sri Hamidun, we are a small country. Of course, today there's a debate of middle power. We can have that debate on another day. But generally, we are small in terms of our size, in terms of our population. That is a fact. So Malaysia as a small state, how we would like to also do our part in maintaining peace, international peace and international security. And of course, we can also do that through our own bilateral efforts with other countries, and also as a small state, we have to use the multilateral means, and that is particular the United Nations, apart from ASEAN, especially for example next year Malaysia will chair ASEAN, and previously in 2015-2005 we too have chaired the ASEAN. And interesting enough, every time when we chair ASEAN there is some sort of like a hallmark. 2015, the declaration of the ASEAN community of the three pillars. 2005 we had the East Asia Summit. So let's hope what will be in store for next year. But next, yeah. So when we come to Malaysia's contribution or Malaysia's efforts in the United Nations, I would like to categorize these three groups of Malaysians who have helped or who have played a significant role. They are diplomats, which I will touch on shortly, and also the security forces, and very much as what Yang Berbahagia Colonel Azman mentioned, the role of the Malaysian Armed Forces, and not forgetting the Royal Malaysian Police or PDRM, and as well as the civilians or the that includes our Prime Ministers, our PMs, our Foreign Ministers, FMs, and also experts, like-minded people who who have this concern or this passion for international peace and contributing through the United Nations. Next. Yeah, thank you. So, as we mentioned earlier on this morning, since independence on the 31st August 1957, Malaysia has applied to become a member of the United Nations. That is, one of the most countries who have just achieved independence, they will do that. It's like, you want to get a birth certificate, so to say, to be recognized as a new member of the international community. So Malaysia is no exceptional. So during the 12th session of the United Nations General Assembly on the 17th September 1957, I think we should also commemorate this date, right? Not just the 1st August and also Malaysia Day, we should also commemorate this date, 17th September, when the Federation of Malaya became the 82 member of the United Nations. So this is the historical picture of Dr. Ismail, our first representative in the United Nations, with Dag Hammarskjöld, who was then the Secretary General of the UN. Next. And during his speech, his inaugural speech, you can download it. Very interesting. Read the speech of Dr. Ismail at the United Nations General Assembly. He was dressed in the typical Malay costume, Malay warrior costume, with a kris in his samping, to symbolize Malaysia, the pride of Malaysia, entering into the United Nations. And he's quoted the words of the first Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Of course, very familiar picture. We have his photo, his picture in all our Malaysian ringgit. Let me just quote what Dr. Ismail said when he quoted the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Almarhum Tuanku Abdul Rahman Ibni Almarhum Tuanku Muhammad. Our king, at the opening of our parliament, had this to say: "It is the intention of my government to be the most friendly terms with all countries in the world. My government stands for peace, freedom, and well-being of every country in the world." In the world. And subsequently, Dr. Ismail also said, we suggest that to a small nation such as ours, as to all small nations, it is the moral strength and our people that we shall find the inspiration to shoulder the responsibility which members of the United Nations bestowed upon us. And I think this pledge of to Dr. Ismail on behalf of Malaysia and the words which he quoted from the Yang di-Pertuan Agong still stands to this very day, where Malaysia is committed to international peace and to promote international peace and security. And next. And precisely so, right, to fulfill this pledge, as was mentioned by Yang Berbahagia Colonel earlier on, 3 years after our independence in 1960, we participated in the peacekeeping operations in Congo. Peacekeeping in Congo. And we were just barely, as I said, 3 years, we were like an infant, but yet we participated in this peacekeeping. And that's not the end. That was just the beginning. And subsequently, next, because I just have 10 minutes, I hope I keep within that time. Next, we went on to participate in various other peacekeeping operations. Alright. In fact, in Congo itself, we contributed about 3,500 troops, and then subsequently, throughout the years, we have contributed, as what Colonel said, 39,000, almost close to 40,000, and peacekeeping operations, and that includes in Lebanon, in Somalia, in Mindanao, South Philippines, in Cambodia, and also in South Sudan. And some of our troops were killed during such operations. And I would like to call upon everyone here, perhaps to keep a 1 minute of silence to commemorate our fallen soldiers during the UN peacekeeping operation, since today we celebrate the UN Day. may their soul rest in peace. And Malaysia being a small country with a not that huge population, it's noteworthy that we have contributed a large number of peacekeeping, and we are ranked 19 among the 122 troops, and among the 8 highest troops, that have contributed troops among the countries from Asia. So other countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. So we are considered, quite high in terms of a number. Countries like Bangladesh, India, which have a high population, with a huge number of armed forces. Apart from the military or the armed forces, and also I would like to take this opportunity also to highlight to demonstrate Malaysia's commitment. Right, we have the Malaysian Peacekeeping Training Center. I think I don't need to go more. I think Colonel Azman had highlighted as well. So that shows our commitment. Not only just we send our troops, we also help to provide training, facilitate courses at the expense of our own budget, our state's budget. So that shows our commitment. Next. So apart from the armed forces and the security forces, right, the police, Malaysia also have actively participate in the various debates and discussion in the United Nations Security Council on various issues that include the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict, and the Kosovo, and the list goes on and on throughout the years, right? Even during the time when there was the Afghan war, Malaysia also have raised these issues in the United Nations. So, and we have also towering diplomats, past and present, who have played a crucial role. Next, we have here Dr. Ratna Krishna Ramani. Please, he's not showing a third finger in the picture. He was actually holding something. Back, please. Yeah. The earlier picture, before. Yes, yeah. All right, he's holding something. All right, and he was involved in the discussion on the Dominican Republic. And Malaysia had been appointed, being the non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 4 times, 1965, 89, 99, and 2015. And apart from people like Ambassador Ramani, we have also Tan Sri PG Lim, right, a female ambassador, who also played a crucial role, and she was the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, or ECOSOC. So long before we talk about female equality, as early as back in the 70s, we had people like Tan Sri PG Lim, who have played also a crucial role. Next. And then of course we have Tan Sri Razali Ismail, a Malaysian diplomat who was elected as the President of the United Nations General Assembly in 1996. And to add on to this, that he is the 3rd among the Southeast Asian diplomats. We had from the Philippines, we had Adam Malik from Indonesia, and also Tan Sri Razali Ismail, who held this post. Next. And I must highlight also that Malaysia has also served as Vice President of the United Nations General Assembly for 6 times, as you can see. I don't need to mention the dates. And Malaysia was elected. Malaysia is one of the 21 elected Vice President of the of the General Assembly during the 77th session. And also Malaysia have played a crucial role in the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, becoming a member for 7 times. And also, we have also Tan Sri Hamidun himself, who have served as the President of ECOSOC in 2010 and have held various key posts within the United Nations. So as I said, the armed forces, the police force, and the diplomats have played a crucial role in fostering this international peace and security through the United Nations. And apart from these two groups, another group which I would like to highlight is the the Prime Minister. Those Prime Ministers, the Foreign Ministers who have played a role during highlighting various issues during the United Nations last year on the 27th September 23, during the 78th session of UNGA, or the United Nations General Assembly, where he gave his maiden speech in the UN. He touched on various topics, and that includes the war in Ukraine, the situation in Myanmar. He also touched on the situation in the Middle East or West Asia, and also the issue on Islamophobia and racism, and that shows the commitment of Malaysian government. I'm coming close to an end, and this is continued next by the recent speech of the Foreign Minister himself, Datuk Seri Muhammad Hassan, during the 79th United Nations General Assembly. He touched on the issue on, again, international justice for Palestinian, and also the calls for reform. He mentioned also about the issue on veto, the situation in Myanmar, and as well as Malaysia being the chair of ASEAN in 2025. So, in conclusion, Malaysia, although small compared to other ASEAN countries such as Indonesia, but since independence, it has demonstrated unceasing support to the UN in maintaining international peace and cooperation. So because back in the university I teach Malaysia's foreign policy, sometimes I like this term. They have this term that say dragon diplomacy of China. I would say we practice the kancil diplomacy. Like in kancil diplomacy, like in folklore, Malaysian folklore, kancil, the animal that is small but yet very crafty, able to navigate his ways to survive in the forest, despite there's a tiger, there's an elephant, yet it survives. And that's very much like Malaysia. We face various major powers, China, Russia, Soviet Union one time, United States, yet we are able to navigate ourselves and we survive. And this kancil diplomacy of ours is also manifested when we have our bilateral relations in the United Nations. With that, I end my presentation.
I was becoming very nervous with Associate Professor Roy Rogers' speech, because he gave him 10 minutes and he spoke for exactly 19 minutes. But I must thank you for a very insightful talk, which I think will contribute to a better understanding of the UN. I would now like to invite Dr. Richard Armitage and Marshall, I asked Dr. Richard Marshall Ford to make his presentation.
Okay, so thank you. I express gratitude for inviting me to join this panel. It's great to be here. I just really Mr. Unam, President of Unam, Minister of Finance, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellencies, fellow panelists. This morning, my contribution to this panel, I'm afraid I am going to return to the open form, which I know Dr. Roy kind of avoided. And I'm really going to talk about the recent efforts in New York as part of the Summit of the Future. Karima talked about this earlier, but I'm going to talk in more detail, particularly around this issue of international peace and security. I'm going to focus on the Pact for the Future. I have a fewer number of slides, but I'm afraid they're more detailed and probably rather less interesting since there are a few pictures. I'm going to take you through what I think are go to the next slide. But I think the way the Pact is structured is, as per the diagram, it has a chapeau, which is an introductory text, and then it has 5 principal chapters. Apologies also, I'm getting over a cold. So I'm going to focus on the second chapter, which is titled International Peace and Security, but I'm also going to talk about the final chapter, chapter 5, which is on the reform of UN governance. And I do this because that is the chapter which includes the recommendations on the Security Council. There are other things there, but those are primarily the most important issues for this topic area. Now, I also need to recall why we are here. And I think, as Karima explained, there's been a series of issues within the UN and ongoing worries. I think very much actually in the former PR's presentation about the UN's ability to meet its responsibilities, particularly in this core area of peace and security. Because if you recall, this is the raison d'etre of the UN. It was founded after the war, to avoid the scourge of war and to protect humankind. And I guess a series of concerns which have built up over the years, which are long articulated. The pact very much speaks to address those in different areas. So if I move to, yes, that's useful, move to the first slide. So the next slide, which introduces this chapter on international peace and security. As I've said, it recognises growing threats to international peace and security, existential threats to humanity, the ongoing nuclear threat, and the UN's core role here, and the need to repurpose the UN and reinvigorate the UN, recognising the sovereignty of member states, but also the core text of the UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the chapter. Next slide. So these are the actions, and I'll run through each of the actions now. Within the whole pact, there are 56 actions. Thankfully, there are rather less for us to consider. So there are 14 under this particular chapter, and then also discuss 2 or 3 in the following in chapter 5. So first, and some of them, if you read the text, some of the actions are very self-explanatory in the titles in the slide. However, some of them will require a little more elaboration, and those are articulated. If you look at the text, there are much more detailed outline of milestones and specific actions to be taken to fulfill each. So we begin with action 13. In efforts to build peaceful and inclusive and just societies, this reflects the fact that most conflicts are actually driven within countries by other factors, issues of ethnic conflict or community relations. It very much speaks to the UN's role in dealing with those issues. Second, very important, is we've heard already, action 14, protecting civilians in areas of conflict, commitments on countries, and recall also the pact includes both commitments and actions by the UN itself and by member states. So a series of actions here to protect civilians, UN through its peacekeeping operation, but also countries in their own conduct within armed conflict about protecting civilians. Additionally, humanitarian assistance under Action 15, Action 16, to promote cooperation between states to avoid even getting into conflict. Use of instruments within the UN to reach a Pacific settlements of disputes. 17, again, as a reference to uphold the work of the Court of Justice in respect to its decisions. And I think the Court has been successful on several occasions at ending conflict, including in this region. For example, the conflict between Cambodia and Thailand, I guess, in the not too distant past. Action 18, a commitment of all to build and sustain peace. I think this one requires some more elaboration. And if you look in the text, this one really speaks to the role of member states themselves and how they conduct themselves and how they commit to the tenets of the UN, of the Charter, and of the Declaration of Human Rights, and a series of actions that member states themselves commit to in the way that in their conduct to avoid conflict. A couple of similar recommended actions firstly on women, peace and security, and also with youth and peace and security. So dedicated actions for countries in the UN system to represent women's views, to involve them in the peace-building processes, and also the same for youth. Action 21, we've heard a presentation on this one, speaking to peacekeeping operations, very much learning from the lessons of the past peacekeeping where we have succeeded and where we've been less successful. I think the key recommendation there is always to have a political agenda, as well as undertake peacekeeping, really to engage in the politics of the UN, to be much more clear about resolving the dispute as well as simply keeping the peace. So we move to the next slide, next set of actions. So action 22, yes. So action 22 on maritime security, very much picking up on these issues of maritime piracy that we have seen and conflicts which are associated with maritime. a series of actions within there, enhancing security and safety for shipping and non-belligerents. Action 23, future free from terrorism, again redoubling efforts to end terrorism, and includes a very clear commitment that terrorism is nowhere justified by any political agenda, and committing all member states to recognise terrorism as a crime. Action 24, working against organised crime and illicit financial flows. Often this is the basis for many conflicts. The flow of resources which fund small arms and so forth is very, very crucial. So working to end those channels to stem the precious force conflict. Then Action 25 and Action 26 together are similar. The first one speaks about the scourge of nuclear weapons, so really redoubling the efforts on disarmament and nuclear. And of course, in recent years, we have a quite strong tradition of nuclear disarmament, and of course, with the retrenchment of Russia between Russia and the United States, some of those efforts have come off track, and of course, there's always the risk of proliferation. Action 26 is similar. It speaks to disarmament more generally, on biological, on chemical weapons of mass destruction, and reinvigorating efforts there. Action 27, speaking to new technologies, recognizing the opportunities, but also the threats of things like autonomous weapons, the use of drones and so forth, the use of AI and these new technologies to really try and regulate and protect against these technologies really enabling and furthering conflict. Now that's it for the chapter 2, but I also want to go to the next slide, about this, about transforming global governance, the 5th chapter. And this one, rather in contrast to the others, is very much more about the UN system, it's about reforming multilateralism, and speaks to some of the weaknesses within the system. And of course, within here, I think as Kareem has told you, the whole discussion of the international financial architecture. But I think crucially within this chapter, there is also a discussion of the Security Council. And if I go to the next slide, I promise I'll finish in exactly 2 minutes. But I think this is very, very crucial, and I think it's probably something we'll come back to in the discussion. Actions 39, 40, and 41 all speak to reform of the Security Council. Now, I think Kareem also explained the precise nature of reform as part of intergovernmental discussions, also referenced when as PR also discussed about the challenges of this. So there's a separate process, but be very clear, the Pact makes a very, very strong commitments on the expansion of the Council and making it more representative, and yes, also to addressing the veto within those processes. And it commits the UN and Action 40 to being very engaged in that intergovernmental process on representing the interests of the wider UN and the General Assembly. I think also to note Action 42 really speaks to enabling the General Assembly to have a different kind of relationship with the Security Council, and seeing how a reform might also engage the wider global community and Security Council's discussion. So I'm going to finish there. Apologies for my cold voices. I have 3 more minutes, but honestly, if I carry on, I'll start coughing, so I will finish there now. I bequeath my 3 minutes to the good inspector for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard Marshall. Thank you. That was very useful information on how the UN can actually act against various threats, including crimes, nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, etc. I now have the pleasure in calling upon Assistant Commissioner of Police, Dr. Sivabalan Spaya, who will provide his perspective on the issue of international peace and security.
Thank you, Doctor. Very good morning to Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank Unam, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, for taking this today as an auspicious day in remembrance of UN Day. And particularly thanks to Dr. Sri Mustafa Mohamad for actually extending the invitation for me to be one of the panelists. And I'd like to read to my fellow panelists too, Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers and Dr. Richard Marshall. So from my perspective, being a police officer, coming to 20 years of service, I did have an opportunity to serve in a peacekeeping mission, and many of my content actually elaborated by Colonel Nur Azman. But I will take you a little bit further. What are the do's and don'ts in the peacekeeping mission? It's a lot of regulations. Being a peacekeeping mission is to uplift the mandate of the United Nations, General Assembly and the Security Council in what the reason of establishment of the peacekeeping. Next slide please. When we talk about this slide actually touched by Dr. but let me elaborate a little bit. Principles of peacekeeping, consent of parties. So peacekeepers are in the country which is denominated as a peacekeeping mission. We are there with the consent of the both parties and dispute. So when peace agreement has been established, peacekeepers are there to assist in their rebuilding. Impartiality, our action and code of conduct, we should not cite any part of it. We are there to execute a function, and that function is up to on the mandate given by the UN Security Council. And non-use of force except in self-defense. I was in South Sudan, and South Sudan is an unarmed mission. So police personnel, we are there in two categories, two components. One as a police advisors, and the other group is formed police unit. The formed police unit acts as a paramilitary. The troops are there to safeguard the security, and then the formed police unit will assist the police advisor in reaching out to the communities. So as you know, South Sudan is the youngest country. They attained their independence on 9 July 2011. So on UN Security Council Resolution 1966 on 8 July 2011, they decided that South Sudan peacekeeping mission has to be established there. Okay, next slide please. These are the core values of United Nations, and these are very important in bringing ourselves as a peacekeeper. Peacekeepers are ambassador of the country, a representation of 193 nations around the world, and from their mandate, the trust to build the representation in the country of conflict or post-conflict. So integrity is the important element, professionalism is the important element, and respect for diversity and gender. These are the three core values that we have as a peacekeepers. We've been ingrained from day one. These are the things that you have to do, and these are the things that you have to deliver from the mandate. So being a peacekeeper, whether you are a troop, you are a policeman, or the civilian is the third component of the United Nations peacekeeping mission. They are very important and the largest component actually in the peacekeeping mission. So they come from the UN agencies, they come directly under UN. So we have the UN civilians, we have the UN troops, and we have the UN police. Next. UN sets a very high standard of discipline. So no compromise on discipline. So as I mentioned, these are things, a lot of good things about being in a peacekeeping mission, but a lot of things that we have to in line with. Next slide please. Zero tolerance on sexual exploitation and abuse. Immediate repatriation for peacekeepers. Immediate repatriation. These are the things that we have to, and the moment you are repatriated, you actually reflect on the country of contribution. So it reflects a lot on the flag you are actually carrying on your sleeve. So as a troop colonel, we all have a huge responsibility when we are in the mission area, because nobody will call colonel, nobody calls you captain, nobody calls you. You are an officer from Malaysian contingent. So you actually carry the flag very high there. Next slide please. Role of police officer, police advisor. Primary to prevent and detect crime. Protect life and property and maintain public order and safety. So the UN police or the police advisor, we are there actually for rebuilding process. And at times that if the mandate requires, you actually becomes an interim law enforcement officer. So in UNMIS itself, we have the IDPs, camp, and we have the POC camps. POC is protection of civilian camps and IDPs, internally displaced camps. So if it is a POC, you have huge responsibility because you will be the law enforcement. You will be the person who actually apprehend, investigate, and you actually deals with the judiciary. But if you are an IDP, you help the local police actually to assist and guide them on human rights violation and monitoring. So please tell me if I take my time. Okay, next slide will be on, let me tell you about, because I'm from South Sudan, and let me give you a brief idea of what's happening in South Sudan, okay? The man right on top left is Dr. John Garang. He's the founding father of South Sudan. So in 2005, they actually reached peace agreement between Sudan and South Sudan. Dr. John Garang was the first vice president of Southern Sudan. So Sudan was actually the largest Central African country, actually, and the Nile River cuts across it. It starts from Uganda, and they are landlocked country, and they are surrounded by 5 nations. So imagine how much the country is, how big the country is. But the population of South Sudan is about 12.7 million, and many lives actually lost due to the 20 years of civil war. But the history actually teaches a lot of things. Why the separation of the North and South actually took place, because the North, primarily, they are Arabics and Muslim. In the South, 60% of the population are Christians, 30% are atheists, or they have their traditional belief, only about 1% Muslims, and you have tribal belief. So 20 years of civil war actually was fighting for these two separation of religion. So in 2005, they actually reached an agreement to let's stop the war. And Dr. John Garang actually was fighting for an independent region. It wasn't his idea to separate the country. But in 2005, unfortunately, he's supposed to be the one, but he died in a helicopter crash. A lot of mysterious calls when he was flying from Uganda to South Sudan, the capital of South Sudan, in Juba, and he was killed in the helicopter crash. It was crash in the air, I think. So the deputy, the next slide please. So you see the two top men there are the President Selama. He was his vice president, and then you have Dr. Riek Machar. They two come from two different tribes. One is the largest tribe is Dinka, and the next largest tribe in South Sudan is the Nuer. So these two have long history. They are from the same roots, but they have a lot of differences. So after Dr. John Garang passed on, in early 2011, they had a referendum, and 98% of the population decided to have an independent state. So this is where UN Security Council decided to take their independence on the 99. So President Selama became the president of South Sudan, and Dr. Riek Machar became one of the 5 vice presidents of South Sudan. So in South Sudan, they have 1 president and 5 vice presidents. So you see how powerful they are. And this conflict between two of them have actually gone after Dr. John Garang passed on. Dr. Selama, the president, tried to hold on and try to bring all the region. But after 2011, in 2013, the issue has become different. They had Ikuti. In between Dinka and Nuer, it's no more about religion. It is about tribal control. So you see, what which initially started from a religion disparity, it actually went to a tribal. So human beings are always greedy. So, in 2013, it was a big loss, even worse. The people start displacing. So about 2 million people actually displaced, and they actually went out of South Sudan. They went to Sudan, they went to Congo, they went to Central Africa, they went to Kenya, all the countries, Ethiopia. So these thing happened in 2013, and in 2015, UN mandate changed to reinforce their presence in the peacekeeping. So they decided to increase the numbers of troops and the police. So this is what is happening in South Sudan. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the key resolutions. Okay, for those students here, resolutions of UN mandate actually evaluated year-to-year basis. So in 2011 was the first resolution passed on to establish peacekeeping, and every year, usually in the month of March, April, they will review it. And the present one was passed on 14 March 2024, and it goes up to 30th April 2025. So every year the mandate change, and the functions of the components, civilian, troops, and the police is based on the mandate given. Next, please. So what are the mandates, the present mandates, and the time from the time myself be there? It is protection of civilians, creating conditions conducive for delivery of humanitarian. Let me look at this. Okay, supporting the implementation of the revitalized agreement, because they had the first agreement in 2005 that came between Sudan and South Sudan, but after the coup in 2013, in 2018 they had a revitalized agreement between the disputing party, and that was even renewed in 2020. And then last, monitoring, investigating, and reporting of violation of humanitarian and human rights law. Next, please. Okay, this is from my album, little bit of my involvement there. So in the UN police, your duty is big. And being unlike the troops, unlike the form police unit, police advisor functions independently. So that means I will not be there together with my countrymen. I will be there with fellow officers from all around the world. So in UNMISS in 2022-2023, there were 45 nations were contributing police officers. And we in the team, we have to talk, communicate. So this is where your respect for diversity is very important. When you are there, you will be living, sharing a room with someone if you don't know that. You don't share the culture, you don't share the religion, you don't share. And you actually work on the basis that you are there to do a job, so to uplift the mandate. So your roommate can be a Christian, your roommate can be an atheist, your roommate can be a Buddhist, but we can, with limited resources, we actually work together and we get all this done. And that is where the peace is there. So these are the things that you actually do. And as a police advisor, you actually deal directly with the community. So whether you are talking to the directly with the community heads or the police chief, is a lot of challenges. Imagine being in South Sudan and prior to their independence, they speak Arabic and they also have local dialects. We do have translators with us, but what you speak, your body language is very important, because often they don't pick what you say, but actually they read from your body language. This is very important. It's not only in Malaysia, but when you actually carry yourself internationally. Okay, next slide please. This little bit from my personal achievement. Upon my return, I actually wrote an article in the paper about my experience in the police, and I was also very proud. And actually, when you are in a peacekeeping mission, you don't serve to be recognized. But I was honored to be recognized as a Peacekeeper of the Day in conjunction of International Peacekeeping Day. So actually, we take the country where we actually take it. So thank you with that, thank you very much.
I must thank Dr. Sivabalan for sticking to his time. How long will it take? You spoke. You only spoke for 13 minutes. I think that what our panelists have done today is actually they have provided an insight into the role played by Malaysia within the UN, by our leaders, by our diplomats, our armed forces. Dr. Marshall has given us an insight into all those areas that can portend trouble for the entire international community in the form of transnational crimes, nuclear warfare, and other issues that threaten the well-being of mankind as a whole, and the responsibility of the UN to counter these things through measures that they have in their statutes. And Dr. Sivabalan has given us an insight into kind of role that he had personally played in Sudan. Sudan is probably the country with one of the worst humanitarian crises today. There was first the issue between Khartoum and South Sudan, but now there is something more serious happening in the division within the government itself, between the revolutionary guards there and the army. But what is interesting is that Malaysia, in spite of, we keep hearing it being said that Malaysia is a relatively small country with a small population. But Malaysia has played a very strategic role in international affairs, judging from all this, which is very commendable that with our limited resources, our leaders still committed the country to playing such a big role in so many peacekeeping operations as highlighted by our Colonel Azman today. This is very impressive indeed. But I must say that today Malaysia's position is even more important because in Asia, if you look at the busiest sea lane, it is that area which is around Malaysia and Indonesia and the ASEAN region, where almost 40% of the world's trade goes through this area. It contains, well, almost one third of the world's population, maybe more than one third of the world's population. So Malaysia has, although in spite of its relatively small size, has a very strategic role and has played a strategic role in international affairs. Now, I thought what I will do now is that I will open the floor for questions. We have about half an hour for questions. And I thought I had a notice that somebody wanted to make a statement relating to the, is this request still alive? No. There's no statement, no question. Okay, in that case, we are quite free to pursue with the question and answer time. I would like to invite the first question from somebody of a millennial or some young person in this room. Is there some young man? Yeah. You just identify yourself and then please ask the question. Sure, please.
Hi, so good afternoon everyone. I'm Callum from UC Berkeley, and my question is relating to what Sir just mentioned, relating to Malaysia's unique position, and especially geographically as well as geopolitically, as a kind of, with our good relations between the global East and the global West. So what do you think is the roadmap for the future? What do you see coming between, like how do we leverage this to drive global change, especially for current issues like Gaza, Palestine, and of course other issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to take on this question, Dr.
I hope I won't take 19 minutes to answer. Thank you very much for the question. Yes, you are right. Malaysia, not just now, historically, right, the location. I would say Malaysia is at the center of Southeast Asia. If you notice, comparing to our neighbors, we are at the very center. We are situated between South China Sea, the Straits of Malacca, which is part of the trading route. So I think Malaysia should use this very natural strength of us, of Malaysia, at a very strategic location for its performance in international relations in terms of either bilateral and multilateral. And Malaysia has been very active since independence. As I just told you, when we were the chair of ASEAN in 2015, 10 years ago, the declaration of the community. Of course, that is an ASEAN effort, but our diplomats have worked hard on towards that, so as East Asia Summit. So we should continue this tradition. We should continue this tradition and play this active role and in line with the concept of ZOFAN, Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality. Some may argue that this concept is a bygone concept of 1971 during the height of the Cold War, when there was war in Vietnam and in Indochina. But I think that concept is even very relevant today, given the situation between, say, US, China, and we do not know who will come back to the White House, perhaps Trump or perhaps Kamala Harris, and Malaysia can play a role as you know, in terms of through the concept of SOFA neutrality. Yeah, this is my quick answer so that I will go back to 19 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to make a comment?
Okay, I'll just say something I think about Malaysia's positioning in the UN, which I have to say is also pretty good, right? You know, Malaysia is pivotal within, you know, it's in ASEAN, it's in the very influential in the OIC as well. So I think, you know, diplomatically, Malaysia's pretty well positioned within the system. I think the pact, you know, I explained the pact for the future has been agreed, you know, by all member states, and Malaysia was active within that. And I think actually the pact and this kind of move to kind of new multilateralism is very useful for Malaysia. If I think about the things, you know, you quickly go on the Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, you know, things that they're concerned about, you know, with the system of things like veto, as you said, you know, people have said about issues about conflict in the Middle East, right, also migrations, international financial architecture. I think all those things are in the pact, so I think, you know, I would encourage Malaysia to play a very full role within the UN system, because I think all the things they're worried about are on the agenda and very strongly there. And I think that you can use that. The way to do that, I think, would be to embrace multilateralism. I was very encouraged when the former PI expressed the desire to move further on the human rights agenda. You know, the UN would very strongly welcome this. I agree with him. I don't think Malaysia does have issues to worry about these instruments, these human rights instruments. And you know, by and large, Malaysia is you know, something of a human rights champion in many areas, right? So I encourage greater engagement. Of course, there are always issues. Every country has issues, but that's what I encourage Malaysia to really embrace this, take its role, you know, within this new multilateralism.
Thank you. Dr. Simba? He's not thank you very much. That was a very good question that you asked. Can we move on to the next question? Maybe somebody from this side? Oh, please.
Good afternoon. My question is regarding the membership of the Security Council and the veto power. A lot has been said regarding this, and a lot of effort has been made to reform this. I remember since Tun Mahathir's time. But it seems like we are not going anywhere. So my question is there a light at the end of this tunnel with regards to the reform of this subject matter?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go first. I think on Security Council there's not much more I can say than I already said. I guess I'm more optimistic than other speakers about this. Because as I've said, the pact very clearly sets out the objections that everybody has said, and that the pact was agreed by all member states. I mean, there was a bit of an issue initially around adoption of the pact, but it was agreed by consensus, in a sense. All member states have adopted the pact for the future, and as I've said, that commits to Security Council reforms and action. And that means that looking at questions of its representativeness, of its size, and yes, of the use of the veto power, maybe, you know, it could be ameliorated or changed in some way. But as I said also, these are also specific issues for the intergovernmental negotiation on the Security Council, which is ongoing. But interestingly also, the pact does say that the UN itself should be more active in that process, right? And and also speaks to the need to engage the General Assembly, the wider global community, in these Security Council reforms. So it's not only about the Council itself, but also it's true. What Pierre said in his speech, it's all about global politics. There is a political dynamic to be considered. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic about reform because I think there is a momentum there. I wouldn't be so disheartened because reform has happened in other areas. I mean, the other area that's always controversial is the international financial architecture, right? And there has been reform there, right? I think progressively, the rise of different economies globally, particularly China, has begun to be recognized. And at one time, someone said, pessimists said, the IMF, the World Bank will never be reformed. But that has progressively happened. So I think that gives an indication of where we're headed. But I really can't say much more than that. But I really would be glass half full about this, not glass half empty.
Thank you for the question. I don't sound to be a pessimist. When it comes to the Security Council, regards to veto, any suggestion to change the veto system, it will be vetoed as well. That is the reality. That is the reality of in the Security Council. Even suggestions, as what Astro mentioned earlier on, to expand there are a lot of challenges, and will the 5 who have been holding that power for the past close to 80 years, will they want to share that special powers of veto to new countries? And if you give them new countries, like say supposing Germany, will they be given this equal veto power or some form of quasi veto power? All these are still their suggestions, but as I said, will they willing to share? And if you were to propose it, it most probably will be vetoed as well. But instead of going into this, all these, I would say these are high-end, may or may not be able to achieve. But let us look at the low-hanging fruits that can be achieved. As Richard mentioned earlier on, Dr. Richard mentioned, low-hanging fruits that perhaps could embark on the reforms of the UN. For example, the bureaucracy of UN, the ever-expanding bureaucracy of UN. On one hand, you speak about overcoming poverty, but the other side, you have the over-expanding of the UN bureaucracy, spending extra money, traveling in a first-class flight to study poverty in Sudan, for example. These are issues that perhaps need to be addressed in terms of its reforms. And also the other areas on the, for example, Security Council, the peacekeeping operations, so that our boys who go and serve in various parts of the world will be safe. The mechanism, these are areas that I think it's achievable in terms of reforms. So yes, we have those high-end themes that perhaps we're not sure whether it will be achieved. I don't want to sound pessimistic, unless if we dismantle the whole UN totally and have a new organization with some new structure. Do we want that? Will that happen? Just like how the League of Nations was established in 1920, then came Second World War, then it was disbanded, then came the UN. Do we want that process of dismantling what we have as a result of something catastrophic, perhaps, then a new organization, then maybe we will have a new system replacing veto, but at a high price. So these are still issues that we have to ponder, but I would say let's move on to something which we can achieve. Reforming within the bureaucracy itself, the role of the Secretary General, the Office of the Secretary General, and then the standards for the peacekeeping operations and things like that. Like just how our Tuan from the police mentioned about the conditions of our peacekeepers, right? These are areas maybe perhaps should be reformed. Small, but it's meaningful to give them a better, more comfortable situation while they served. Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Thank you. If I may, I would like to offer a comment on this. This is somewhat controversial. because my good friend Tan Sri Hamidon spoke about the P5 and how important they are in the whole UN process in regard to maintaining international peace and security. I have now increasingly come to believe that the UN has got not 5 but 6 members, and the 6th P5 member is Israel, unfortunately. You see, because they seem to be able to do whatever they like. I mean, you just look at the current humanitarian crisis, catastrophe that has taken place in the Gaza area, and no human being can, in any kind of conscience, can condone, what is happening there. This is overkill. You have the armed might of a well-equipped country backed by the world's strongest military power, unleashing the worst kind of cruelty on humanity. So it seems to me now that it's not no longer the P5. It's some absent member who has got P6 status. I don't know what is the view of the panel on this. Can I hear your views?
I'm not sure I have a view on next one, but I think there are clearly issues, and I think the General Secretary has been very, very clear and also attracted criticism by being very clear. And he's very strongly called for an end to hostilities and to access for peacekeepers and to the protection of civilians and end to the loss of life. So again, I'm trying to be more optimistic. I think the situation is very problematic, yes, but it might be even worse without having the UN in place. I can't think of that. And the peace must come, and the UN, I think, is the best place to arrange that peace and to deliver the support it needs. But I really can't go any further. The UN's Secretary General has already been very, very clear on this, and as I've said, attracted criticism of his views. So I don't. It's very difficult for me to sustain the position that I think it was a 6th member of the council, a permanent member of the council. I think that's difficult to sustain, given because the institution, I think, has been very, very clear. What the Security Council decides, though, of course, is the nature of the council itself, and it comes to a decision, as everybody knows, driven, by the powerful mandate of 5, and that's the reality of governance and the Security Council. But for the UN as an institution, I think they've been better.
Thank you. I mean, having a 6th member, a hidden member, sounds very much like, in watching Da Vinci Code, there is a hidden organization behind. And I mean, well, these are critics, and I think need to be addressed, as in there is a general perception of many, which is not too healthy for the UN. But having said all this, we also need to be fair that to be in the past 79 years of the UN existence, it has done a wonderful job in the issues on social, in terms of problems of overcoming the poverty in the areas of education. It has done a wonderful job. So, but unfortunately, issues like just Datuk Santa mentioned have overshadowed the successes of the United Nations, with all this criticism or sarcasm of having a 6th member. The UN has to, as I said, to address it, but we also have to be fair to the UN to look at its successes in the past 79 years in the area of economy, social, and all. Thank you.
No, I agree that I think in regard to international peace and security, there is no substitute for the United Nations alone, and not for the Security Council also. But it is just that this is a view that I'm expressing because there is a widespread perception that if we do not arrest the current situation, we might actually be parties to something that is horrible, that is really unprecedented in history. This is almost like what happened in Belgium, under the, when what they call it Congo, where people are exterminated. So what is happening is it's clearly a genocide, and the UN Security Council, in spite of all its resolutions, seems helpless. There is no doubt that the United Nations system is indispensable to international peace and security, and also in other areas, socio-economic areas also. But the reality is that the ineffectiveness of the UN with regard to the current situation in Gaza and now the extended war in Lebanon is a matter of concern for everyone on a human basis. Well,
I think international organization has its limitations. I don't want to be an apologist for the UN. It's true. This has created a deficit of trust to the UN. But these organizations, they have their limited abilities. We mentioned, I totally agree with Dr. Santa, but we bring it back to closer to our home. What is ASEAN really doing for Myanmar? Since the coup d'etat has taken the 5-point consensus. All right, I don't need to digress from today's UN topic, sorry, but what the 5-point consensus, but where is the progress on the 5-point consensus? These are issues, again, ASEAN is also a regional organization, an international organization. It has its somehow limitations because members are states, and states serve their national interests, and if it doesn't serve their national interests, they wouldn't want to act. I don't want to sound like a realist, Hans Morgenthau, but that is a reality. That is a reality. If it doesn't serve the national interests, although they are members, they will not want to work or they will not want to cooperate. That is a limitation of international organizations, be it at the global level like the UN or at the regional level, ASEAN. Sorry, I don't want to sound so pessimistic today. It's supposed to celebrate the UN Day. Sorry, thank you, Doctor.
Is there any other questions? Yes, please. Yes.
Datuk. Can you remain seated for 5 minutes? Our esteemed panelists, speakers, on behalf of Unam, as Unam President, let me again express our gratitude to everyone. As I said, we're very impressed with the huge turnout. There's a full house, hardly any seat. In the morning, of course, it was full. Some attrition. But having said that, I think we're very happy with the outcome. Firstly, in terms of attendance. Number two, of course, quality of participation. The speakers have been excellent. All of the speakers we had this morning, beginning with Karima, ending with the panel. Let me give all of them a big hand. I would also like to thank my committee members who've been working very hard. They were here all day yesterday, and they were here last night. I was here last night as well. We started work early this morning. We came at 7 o'clock. That demonstrated the very strong commitment they have, the passion to work together as a team. We are a wonderful team. This is 18 that I have. I would like to thank all of them, in front of all of you, to recognize the hard work that they put in. This is just the beginning. This is the first major program that we have. Moving forward, we'll have a few more, and of course we need the support. I would like to recognize also, once again, the participation of universities. I mean, sorry, I mentioned Sunway and UCLA in the morning, but I know that UCAM, UIA, UITM, and University of Peranan, and Berkeley, and many others. We really appreciate the strong support. UN of Malaysia, Unam, is working closely with many of these organizations. We worked a few weeks ago with Model UN. There was a review, a very fantastic program they had. More than about 300 people participated. Thank you, Tracy, putting your hands there. Yeah? So thank you very much again, everyone, for the support. There's some small snakes out there, so enjoy yourself. I would like to apologize for any shortcomings. But once again, thank you for your support. Speakers, in particular, about Congo, about history, about UN. Personally, it's been a very useful learning experience, and I'm sure it's been equally enjoyable to all of you. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Enjoy the night food event upstairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of today's forum, the United Nations 8 Decades, Issues and Challenges. We have heard valuable insights from our distinguished speakers and panelists, providing a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by the United Nations and the pivotal role it plays in the global arena. On behalf of the United